everybody. Welcome to the Firefighters Podcast. Joining me this week will be our first repeat guest, my brother Andy, because we have a couple of topics to discuss. Some anniversaries coming up and a bit of happy news for a change. So, Andy, welcome back.
How's it going, Rob?
Good. I apologize in advance for any noises you may hear in the background. I believe they're digging up Jimmy Hoffa outside my studio here. So
good. One thing
I
we can check
apologize.
off the list to solve that.
Yeah. Let's start out. There's an anniversary coming up for a line of duty death. I always said it was my first line of duty funeral on December 2nd, 1984. Our family friend, Phil Diadamo, died in the line of duty. And I know you know a lot more about that story than I do. So walk everybody through that.
I was young, obviously, myself, right? I think 11 years old, I guess. But I do remember it specifically, just a little bit of backstory. We knew Phil for years. He was Little League coach for, I think, Joey and Anthony were the same age, right? His son. And, Phil was always around. They were always at our house. Our mom and Phil's wife, Grace, were very close friends. So they were just always a part of the family. And I remember I went to church that morning. We were in Catholic school, so I went to church by myself on a Sunday morning. And I remember the priest in the middle of the mass saying, asking everyone to pray for firefighter Philip Diadamo. And it didn't really make sense to me why he said that or what really was going on. And I remember coming home, and just about as I was getting in the door, the phone rang and Mommy got a phone call. And she answered it, and then I remember her screaming, Daddy. It was this one day that he slept late, a little bit later, because he always got up early to go to work. So he was sleeping a little bit later, and she screamed, and he came running out, and I remember her saying Phil died, and that's my earliest memory of that. And then I remember Mommy obviously went and to be with Grace, but then I remember the funeral. We were in. It was still a school day at St. Anne's school, and we all watched out the window as the procession went by. And I remember seeing, I just could not believe how many firefighters were there in the blue uniform. It was the first time I ever experienced that. 8,000, 10,000 firefighters lined up, on Cromwell Avenue. You never see something like that. So that does, I guess Mommy decided to send us to school. I don't, just so she could, concentrate on being with the family, I guess, but we went to school for whatever reason, and that's my earliest memory of that.
I remember that the funeral also. I was in school, but I was across the street. I was in kindergarten. At that time, St. Anne's didn't have kindergarten, right? So I went to PS 11. If you're not a Staten Islander out there in the Dungan Hills section of Staten Island, as Andy mentioned, on Cromwell Avenue, there's like a little triangle. There's a public school, and then right across the street is St. Anne's Church, and then across the other street is St. Anne's School. And there's a couple parking lots mixed in there, but it's really one big block of school, basically. And I remember my teacher, in my classroom faced St. Anne's. I was like on the corner. What is that street that goes this way? Garrettson or something? What runs perpendicular?
Right. Oh no, it's been so long since I've
right. I know.
Yeah.
That's Jefferson. Jefferson, maybe.
It's Jefferson. Yeah.
Okay. So I was on the corner of Jefferson and Cromwell. And for whatever reason, the teacher let me stand in the window, because remember those giant windows in PS 11?
Yeah.
So I was standing in the windowsill looking down. And like you said, I just saw blue hats, probably to Highland Boulevard. I couldn't,
Right.
But, I was only like 4 or 5. So that's as much as I remember. And Phil, I don't have many memories of him, because I was so little. But the lasting memory I have is I remember I was standing next to him at the barbecue. For some reason, I always remember him barbecuing. And and just looking up, and he was like, the sun was behind him, and all I could see was his giant mustache. He had like a triumphant. If you
Yeah,
think of a firefighter's mustache, that was Phil's mustache, and he was holding a can of beer. That's the
yeah, it's so, and it's so easy, like especially when you come on the job, right, with line of duty deaths, you see names on the wall and plaques, and especially from years ago, it's not too often that you have a face to the name and a personality goes with it, and you realize, like when you walk in headquarters, the hundreds and hundreds of names on the memorial wall. Every one of them is a story. Every one of them is a devastated family. Every one of them is a lifetime of memories. And, like you said, he was always so full of life. And I remember being backyard and barbecues, and he just enjoyed every moment. He, if I'm not mistaken, I think he was a Vietnam veteran. He was a cop for a couple of years, and then he joined the fire department. And he, typified, that that spirit of the fire department, family life, work life. He was the jokester of the firehouse. The 118 truck where Phil worked was in my battalion when I was in the 3-2 battalion. And they still have in the kitchen, the clock on the wall is upside down.
yeah.
And underneath it, they have a daily news article explaining that right after he died. That night, the night he died, whenever, everyone, I guess it was overnight, when everyone was out of the kitchen upstairs, he turned the clock upside down. He was always doing, pranks like that, I guess. And he turned it upside down, and they realized that when they got back that he did that, and they haven't touched it since. So the clock is still upside down there, and that's just typical of, of all firemen. But really, when a fireman is lost like that, you really feel what they left behind.
Yeah. I remember that story. I actually have that article still. It was hanging at my old house. It'll be hanging in my new studios, which hopefully will be ready soon. As you can hear, they're working on it.
Right.
But yeah, for me too, I remember the first time I walked into 105 and saw the clock and the story hanging there. That
118.
118. I mean, sorry. It's 205 and 118, right?
Yeah.
All right. And I saw this article, like it hit me because I've been looking at those articles my whole life. We've had them in our house. And it's true. Like when you see the plaque, it's kind of like, it's not as personal as, I guess when you actually see the
Right.
name of someone. But that also reminded me of the Richie Sclafani story. I don't know if you heard this, who died on Black Sunday from 103. But apparently he had a puppy,
Yeah, I
and
remember that. Yeah.
the puppy was tied up to his gear locker when they went on the run. And I just always thought about that puppy, that he never came back.
Yeah, no. It's, there's a lot of stories like that. One thing, the other memory, like I said, of being at church and the priest announcing to pray for Phil D'Adamo. The other thing that sticks out in my mind, and it's kind of side related, but I think it ties in how, we often use humor to deal with life and to get on. And we had a great example of that growing up, as you'll know. It had to be maybe a month or two after Phil died, and a couple of months maybe, and maybe Grace was getting away or going somewhere, and the two youngest children, Anthony and Stephanie, came to stay with us for the weekend. They slept over, and I guess the older boy Michael was maybe it was a sports tournament that Grace took him to. Wherever it was, they were away, and Anthony and Stephanie came to stay with us. And I guess in my memory and my impression, maybe it was the first time they were away from their mother since it happened, or they felt a little weird about sleeping over our house, and they were just a little kind of out of sorts. And mommy and daddy threw us all, now, pre seatbelt laws, pre everything. We were all in the back seat of the Buick, right?
Yeah.
So the three boys and Anthony and Stephanie in the back seat of the Buick, and we go out for a ride, and we go to the McDonald's drive-thru. I guess they wanted to cheer us up. We're just, that's what they got us for dinner. So we go through the drive-thru with the Buick, which was about 75 feet long, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
Yeah.
74.
So we go through the drive-through, we come out, and then mommy has the bags of food on the bench seat between her and daddy, and they're handing out burgers, handing out this and that. We're driving down Holland Boulevard, and she crumples up one of the bags and leaves it there. And I see daddy look in the mirror, he's looking at the kids and handing out burgers, and Anthony and Stephanie, they got their burger. And next to us at a light on Holland Boulevard pulls up a convertible. And in the convertible, we're like, if you had to like draw a stereotypical douchey Ken doll, you're like, in my mind, this might not be true, but they had like golf shirts on with a sweater tied around their neck,
Right.
and, with their hair perfect, and they were both in both sitting in a convertible, which I don't even know if it was convertible weather, but they were in a convertible, and they're sitting at the light next to us, and they just pull up, and I see daddy look in the mirror and his window's down, and then he grabs the crumpled up McDonald's bag with like garbage in it and everything, and the light changes. He puts his window down and throws the bag and hits the guy in the side of the head. And the guy is like this, and we all start cracking up laughing. He drives away. That was it. He didn't say anything. He didn't announce anything. He just did it and drove away. And I remember Anthony and Stephanie in particular just laughing so loud. All of us laughing so loud. And I guess that's daddy. He just finds a way to cut through any moment with humor.
Yeah, I wonder.
Those guys got a surprise.
Yeah, right. I know. We would have been more surprised if he didn't throw a bag of garbage at the guy next to him. That's funny.
But I'll never forget that. That sticks out.
I know. I think. I mean, I don't know how many hundreds of line of duty funerals I've been to now. But I think that's what always gets me is seeing the kid holding the helmet outside the kid. Like I don't know. That usually I can make it until I see that or hear Amazing Grace, which I've grown to fucking hate. I always love that song, but now I can't hear it played through bagpipes. I guess it's just too much at this point. But yeah, I think. I mean, we experienced it a little just from the outside, but I can't imagine, your dad not coming home from work. I think he was like 34, so the kids couldn't have been that old, right?
Yeah, they were all our ages, I think, more or less, right?
Yeah.
So 12 and under for sure.
Yeah. And that seems to happen all the time. Like very rarely do you not see young kids left behind, it seems like. I know that Michael Davidson had like 3 or 4 kids. I know Sully had a bunch of kids. I don't know. Sucks. Anyway, if you don't know about the fire, it happened in Brooklyn in what we now call Dumbo, right? It was in St. Anne's, ironically, another St. Anne's school. I believe it was in the auditorium or something, and the smoke and the fire spread to a different floor, and I think that's where they found Phil unconscious, right? So I guess the smoke got him, or cardiac arrest. But yeah, so it's a good story to read up on. There are definitely some lessons to be learned in there. Certainly, I think some procedures changed after that, right? So there's always something to be learned.
I don't actually recall the exact particulars of the fire. I know I think he was the truck chauffeur that night, and he was doing a search. I don't know if he got separated or if he was, back then the procedure was, it wasn't 2 in, 2 out where,
Right.
Where it was really against the regulations to do a search, especially for a chauffeur. You would put up a ladder to a window and go search the room, it was just SOP back then. But I actually don't recall the actual particulars of how he came to be overcome.
Yeah, I remember actually an instructor bringing it up in the academy. He must have known Phil or worked in the area when we were talking about search. That's how I remember he was alone. Like, as far as I can remember, I think he just, it was smoke inhalation or whatever, and he They
Ran
found
out
him
of gas or something, you know.
yeah, I think Lieutenant Martinez was that Phil's friend. Um, I don't remember. I saw an initial article that said he said it was heart attack, but that was a 30-something-year-old article, so
Yeah, and
I'm
I
not
mean,
sure.
a lot of deaths just got classified that way. I was,
Right.
smoke inhalation, cardiac arrest caused from
Right. I
smoke.
mean, everyone dies of cardiac arrest, right? So it's kind of
Right.
a broad stroke. All right. I don't know if you feel like getting into it, but there's another fatal fire anniversary coming up, which probably is a whole episode, but
Yeah,
want to
it's
just touch on your
yeah. I
response
mean,
there.
just on the subject, when I was on the job, the first line of duty fatal fire was December 18th, 1998, was the Vandalia Avenue fire in Brooklyn. And I was working that night and in 131, and we got relocated to ladder 120, Brownsville, at like 5 in the morning, and what stands out to me is that how quiet the radio was. I don't even know if it went to a second alarm or maybe it did after the fact, but the only thing on, just you didn't hear anything crazy on the radio or anything seemingly out of the ordinary. The only thing that stood out was Car 4 David was on the air, said, responding to the fire, which would have probably been a staff chief or a chaplain or somebody.
Right, but that's
But
something you
I
don't
didn't
hear
know
all
that
the
at the
time.
time.
Right.
Yeah, but we got to the firehouse in Brownsville and backed in, and we were lounging around and waiting for the companies to get back from the fire, not knowing anything. So they came and they backed in, and the guys looked beat up and looked, out of it and sad and like PTSD almost. We couldn't, but I still
The
didn't know
glare.
anything was
Yeah.
happening. I grabbed the guy. I said, "Oh, how was the fire? Was it a good job?" And he looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, "What?" He goes, "You didn't hear what happened?" I'm like, "No, like nothing was on the department radio, nothing, because it happened so quickly there, and it wasn't the type of thing where like, it just overcame the first few units. And if anyone doesn't know the story, basically, the first two ladder company got up to the fire floor. It was a high-rise, fireproof, multiple dwelling, and I think it was a top floor, 12th floor. They got up there. There was a person in a wheelchair in the hallway. They initial units got on the scene and helped, who I think ended up being the occupant of the apartment. They helped this individual down the stairs just in time, and the members of ladder 170 were getting to the apartment door to continue the search. And one of the windows let out, and the door, because the man in the wheelchair was coming out, the door had been opened, and the wind ended up driving the fire into the hallway and causing an inferno. And they were killed on impact. They were basically incinerated. Right. Two young firefighters and a lieutenant, James, Lieutenant Cavalieri and Christopher Bopp and James Bohan. And they were, one had 3 years on the job, the other had 2 years on the job. They were, and in a almost, it wasn't a project complex, but a high rise, a multiple dwelling complex like that. Those are buildings we went to all the time in Red Hook, and I was a young firefighter, in a ladder company. It's, it kind of, hit home a little bit that, it was the first fatal fire I was confronted with, and I'll always remember that. I'll remember the funerals, in the next coming days. It's almost like it starts a whole, ritual. Yeah, everyone, you scramble, you set up your tours when you're going to the wake, when you're going to the funeral. Now there was 3 funerals within 4 days, I think.
Right.
So it was very striking.
Right. And a bit foreshadowing. We had that again in 2001, which seems to get lost. Also, is 4 line of duty deaths before 9/11 within a couple months. Right, we had 3 on Father's Day. In an
and earlier in
explosion.
the year, There was a line of duty death earlier in the year, firefighter Franklin up in Harlem, I think in January of 2001.
Oh, see, I
Yeah,
completely
and
forgot
then
about that myself. So then it
Father's
makes
Day,
five,
And then Michael Garumba on Staten Island,
right?
right, and then 9/11. Yeah.
Right. So people don't realize we were having a shit year to begin with on 9/11. Um, but yeah, the that was a little bit of what we saw was the shuffling around schedules to make it to funerals every day
Yeah.
and all that. All right. Well, I know we have some good news, right? I mean, we're talking about some heavy stuff the last few episodes, but we have a bit of good news down in Soho at the firehouse. A couple years ago, we lost 20, the Dalmatian, who was probably the most famous dog in New York City. If you've ever been to New York City and you've seen a Dalmatian hanging out the side of a fire truck, it was probably 20, who was gifted to Ladder 20 following 9/11. But I'll let Andy give the story because something cool very happened in the wake of another sad event. But such is life. So
Yeah, it's 20 was given to the firehouse in 2001. A group of just good-hearted people up in Rochester decided to do something for New York City, and I believe they brought down two Dalmatians and donated them to firehouses. And Ladder 20 ended up with one and named her 20, and she was there for almost 16 years, I think, over 15 years. She was a neighborhood fixture. She would go up and down the sidewalk and beg for food at the at the outdoor cafes on the corner, and everyone knew her. And she would never leave the sidewalk area, and she'd come back in, and she was a part of the firehouse forever. And side note to that, Mike Toll was the senior man in Ladder 20, retired with 30 years on the job, and he's a big, burly, tough fireman, and but he was like a little kid with 20, always on his knees petting her, and even after he retired, she'd hear him come in the door, and she'd get up even with her limbs creaky and attitude, but she'd run over to him and jump up on him,
Mm.
So 20 died, I want to say in 2016, and believe it or not, we had offers I counted over 30 offers from around the country and of people looking to donate a Dalmatian to the firehouse. But I think it was too soon for guys, and they wanted to wait a little while. And then out of the blue, a few months ago, we get a note in the mail from the same group up in Rochester that they raised money and were donating another Dalmatian to Ladder 20. And a breeder in Iowa was kind enough to also donate, and they donated the actual puppy, and the group from Rochester bought them plane tickets to bring the dog. The dog actually flew up in the cockpit with the with the pilot for a little while. They got pictures of the dog coming, and
that's awesome.
and they brought the dog to the firehouse, the puppy. And a side note to that, Mike Toll, who I mentioned before, a couple of years ago came down with a nasty form of cancer and fought it for a few years, and in September ended up just this past fall, I should say, ended up dying from cancer. And it hit the firehouse hard. Mike was, even though he'd been retired, he was still the life of one of those rocks of the firehouse, always came around.
And his cancer was 9/11
yeah,
related, right? So it is a job related.
absolutely.
Death.
It was from his time spent at the World Trade Center, and
Right.
it was declared, it was ruled a line of duty death. And he had a couple of tumors, and he had surgery, and it hit him hard. And I like to say it's as if the universe knew, maybe it couldn't stop this from happening, but figured it could, I don't know, make it a little bit easier for the firehouse. And right around the time Mike died, we get a note from Rochester that they're sending us a puppy.
Right.
And, I think it was just a cosmic coincidence. And everyone decided, Mike Toll used to play football in high school, and his nickname was Tank. So when the puppy came to the firehouse, everyone agreed that there was only one thing to call the little boy, and we called him Tank. So, and
That's
he's well
awesome.
on his way to being the next most famous dog in New York City. So,
All right. Is he making his way out up and down Lafayette Street yet or what?
on a leash,
Okay.
he's doing good.
Yeah, he's taking in runs? Not
Not
yet?
yet.
All right.
He's not
All
up
right.
to that yet.
All right, we'll get there. All right. Well, yeah, that is good. I mean, that's that. I loved hearing when you told me that they passed out notes on the plane, and so all the people knew where the dog was going and they were all playing with him. Like I just
Yeah, all the
that's a
flight
cool visual to
attendants.
have.
Yeah, it was cool.
A lot of people involved in making this happen.
And
So pretty cool on everyone's behalf, not just the was it sheriffs up in Rochester, but the
I believe
breeders,
the organization is involved with sheriff's office in Rochester. Yeah.
right? And the breeders too. They got into it and gave their time and flew the dog
Yeah.
here, which is cool. So they're still good out there. There's still people doing good
Yeah, for
stuff.
sure.
Um, which is why I wanted to have you on specifically to tell the dog story, because I think we need some good stories. Especially the last few episodes I had weren't very happy. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Um,
My pleasure.
and thanks for coming on and squeezing me in. But I wanted to talk about those two fires because it's that time of year, and specifically Phil's fire affected us, right? Growing up, certainly taught us the risks, right? So glad we got to talk about Phil too. So
Yeah.
thank you. And Andy will be back on with us every once in a while to share some stories. But he's working on something right now. He's got a new book coming out soon, I hope. Can you tell us a little bit about it before you go?
Yeah, and early 2022 should be the release for a novel I've been tinkering with the last couple of years. Centers around the Occupy Wall Street protests which is the 10-year anniversary just passed. So kind of a New York story. So
All right,
hopefully it'll
cool.
resonate with some people.
So this is book number 4 or 5?
Yeah.
Does
No,
the
4.
Italian translation count as its own book, or?
We'll keep it as part of the same project.
All right. Well, thank you for continuing to make me look bad by writing books once a year and getting degrees. But check him out. His other books are on Amazon. They're pretty good, I would say. You should check them out. There's Petit Parisien, right? Am I pronouncing that right?
That is, yep.
There's Finding John, which is his 9/11 memoir, which has been translated into Italian for our Italian friends out there. What was the name of your first book? I forget.
The Dead Florentines.
Dead Florentine. How could I forget? That sounds like a band. I like that one. Yeah, because I love Florence. I love the whole story, the Medici story. If you're into that, if you've been to Florence, definitely check out the Dead Florentines. Brings you right back there. So reminded me of the Agony and the Ecstasy. I kind of got the same. I had the same visuals. So anyway, all right. Well, that's it for Andy. I'm gonna let him go. He's got to go. I don't know, write a book. Cure a disease or something. But thanks, dude.
All right.
I'll talk to you later.
All right, later.